Hello everyone, it's Annie, and today it is time for me to share my favorite nonfiction reads. Because Nonfiction November is almost here, it's coming up very fast, and I have some plans which I will share with you in my November TBR, of course. But in the meantime, I would like to share with you my absolute favorite nonfiction reads, almost all of which are memoirs, I think. So if you're into that, this is the video for you. And let's get started with my first pick, which is Inferno by Catherine Cho. This is an amazing book that I have talked about in some of my past videos as well. This is about Catherine's experience with postpartum psychosis. So the background of the book is that her and her husband, who live in London, are on a cross-country trip of America to meet all of their relatives and show this baby off to them, basically. And while they're on this trip, Catherine succumbs to psychosis very, very suddenly. And it's about her experience in a psych ward of a hospital in America, basically. And this memoir is very, very raw, very vulnerable. I really commend Catherine Cho for writing about this extremely vulnerable time in her life. It was so captivating. The prose, Catherine Cho's writing is stunning, really, really stunning, and it's just so heartbreaking to read about what she sees and does in this psych ward of the hospital and all of her feelings. She really does not spare anything. She gets it all out there, and it's just breathtaking to read. And I think this book really sheds a light on something that is not talked about half as much as it should be. Forget about postpartum psychosis, but even postpartum depression, which is something that so many women face, is not talked about enough. So this is a really great memoir to read if you want to read about a very raw, realistic experience of being a woman. And again, Catherine Cho's writing is just absolutely incredible. So this is highly, highly recommended. The next book I'd like to say is Unnatural Causes by Dr. Richard Shepard. He was Britain's leading forensic pathologist. This book just blew me out of the water when I read it last year. It is still one of my favorite nonfiction reads. I just remember listening to it, and I believe it's narrated by the author as well, and I just could not put it down. It was so captivating, and I really also really appreciated his writing style, and he has a very good balance between his memoir of his life and also describing the cases that he worked with in a really tasteful way. I don't know if that's a good thing to say about, working with dead bodies, but he treats these victims with the utmost respect in this book, and it's absolutely not gory or for shock value or anything like that. He is very, very respectful to the victims and to their lives. It's just such a well-written memoir, and I am really interested in things like that. I really like true crime and forensic science and things like that. So if you are at all interested in this, he talks about some really, really interesting cases that he's worked on in his very illustrious career. And I highly, highly recommend this because it is just such a well-balanced memoir and one of my favorites. In kind of the same true crime vein, I'd like to recommend Columbine, which was written by, I believe, an investigative journalist who covered the story originally. So if you don't know the story of the Columbine high school shooting, let me just tell you about it very, very quickly. Two boys basically went into their high school with no warning and shot up the place and killed a lot of people, and it was very, very tragic, and it kind of started all of the school shootings that happen in the United States. And I didn't know much about the case. I mean, I knew of it. Everyone in the United States knows about it. It's very, very infamous, but I didn't know any of the details. And it's a misconception that a lot of people have, that these two boys were horribly bullied and that this was revenge for that, when it really wasn't. And this book dives into their real reasons and, how this might have been prevented as well. And this book is also extremely respectful to everyone involved, even the murderers and their families especially, which I really appreciated. It's very respectful to their parents and to the victims, of course. And I just think the author did a great job of telling you the facts while also showing you that what the media portrays about this case isn't the whole truth. And I just think it was a very, very well-crafted nonfiction piece that a lot of people should pick up to really know what really happened. And the next book I'd like to talk about is Educated by Tara Westover. I don't click off this video. I know this is extremely popular and very well loved, but it's for such a good reason. This book just blew my mind. Her story is incredible. She grew up in a very rural mountain, not even village. She was very, very isolated with her family, her siblings, and her parents, who were basically the type of Mormon who believes that the world is going to come to an end and they need to prepare for that. But they also didn't believe in doctors or washing your hands or, anything like that. And she was very, very isolated and abused in this situation horribly. So before you read this, definitely check out content warnings, because some of the scenes in this are extremely upsetting, especially about the abuse that she suffers from her brother. It was really, really upsetting. But learning how Tara got through this and brought herself out of this abusive situation into success and getting a master's degree is just absolutely breathtaking to read about. This memoir is something that I will always, always remember. And if you haven't picked it up already, what are you waiting for? You absolutely should this Nonfiction November. And the next book will be High School, a memoir by Tegan and Sara. So of course, it probably helps if you're a fan of Tegan and Sara, the musicians, to read this book. But I feel like this is very underrated because Tegan and Sara are quite famous, but this book only has about 5,000 ratings on Goodreads, which is quite low for a celebrity memoir. But this book I have to recommend, especially the audiobook, because it has real clips of them recording as children and teenagers and playing around on their guitars and playing demos of songs that they wrote together. It's just an amazing experience to listen to this. This book it was really special to me when I read it. I wouldn't call myself a huge fan of Tegan and Sara. I mean, I like them, obviously, but I'm not a super fan of them. But this really, it was just amazing to see their talent. They have really, really raw, almost prodigy level talent, I would say, just from what they've written and showing how they journeyed from kids playing guitar as a hobby and constantly fighting with each other into being these iconic twin musicians that everybody loves. And it was just really amazing to see their journey. And they just came across very, very down to earth and very emotional at times as well, but just very real. And I feel like that's a little bit hard to do with a celebrity memoir sometimes, especially, sometimes they have ghostwriters and things like that. This did not feel like that. It felt like it came from a very genuine place. So if you're a fan of Tegan and Sara, or even if you just like listening to a couple of their songs, I think reading this book will make you a bigger fan of them. It was really entertaining. And next, I'd like to talk about Cultish, The Language of Fanaticism by Amanda Montell. I loved this book. It's a pretty recent release. It came out this year. This book is about the language that cults use to basically draw people in and then keep them there. And it's not just about, the Jonestown type religious cults or the Moonies or anything like that. It does have that. That is a big part of the book. Very, very interesting. As I've said, I'm very interested in true crime, especially cults. I am really interested. I have watched pretty much every documentary about cults on Netflix that exists. So this book was right up my alley. Linguistics and cults. Yes, please. And this book also talks about multi-level marketing schemes and the language that they use to kind of draw people in through social media, the language that influencers use to grow their fan base, and things like that. It is so interesting. The author also wrote a feminist linguistics book, which I don't remember the name of, but I will put it up or in the description somewhere. And her father was also an escapee of a cult in the 70s or something like that, so she has a really personal investment in this type of research. So it was really interesting to know that she was coming from that perspective as well. And this book was just endlessly interesting. I really enjoyed it. And if you're interested at all, don't worry, because it's not too technical with linguistics terms and things like that. I think it would be really accessible for anyone to read. And if you're interested at all in cults, absolutely give this a try. And also the cover is gorgeous. And lastly, I'd like to highlight a YA nonfiction memoir. That is how it's marketed, however, it deals with extremely heavy themes, and the book is How Dare the Sun Rise? Memoirs of a War Child. And it follows the author who grew up in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and her family was horribly persecuted against because of the tribe that they come from, and they lived a lot of their lives going from refugee camp to refugee camp in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And unfortunately, the catalyst of this book is that there was a horrific massacre that killed most people in the camp where they were staying. So she ends up first having to move to a neighboring country, and then eventually she and her family become refugees and move to America. And it really highlights the experience that refugees have coming to America and being so unfamiliar, and the difficulties that they are put through is just so, it was really eye-opening for me to hear it from the perspective of someone that went through such a traumatic event and then had to deal with the harsh reality of being a refugee and trying to make a life for yourself there. And she was so successful in writing this memoir. I think it is so important to read, and it's really eye-opening and incredibly important. So please give this a read. All right, and that is it for my Nonfiction November recommendations. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have read any of these books, or if you're planning on picking any of them up because of my recommendation, absolutely please let me know down below in the comments. I'd love to talk to you about it. And that's it. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!